over half a year, leading up to May 18, 42, in preparation for collaborating with Bruno Bauer on critiquing Christian art and discussing the general nature of religion. Marx filled 7 notebooks with notes on art history and religious history, later known as the Bonn Notebooks. These contained excerpts from 7 specialized works addressing issues of art theory and religious theory. They documented Marx's reflections on religion and art, witnessing his early shift from idealism towards materialism. 3 of these notebooks contained excerpts from the French thinker Benjamin Constant's On Religion, a masterpiece containing many brilliant expressions of naive materialism. First, Constant argued that religion is a product of the actual development of human society and the state. Echoing this in his July article, the leading article in number 179 of the Kölnische Gazette, Marx wrote, "It was not the downfall of the old religions that brought about the downfall of the ancient states, but the downfall of the ancient states that brought about the downfall of the old religions."
Second, Constant critiqued the common dogmatism, revisionism, and bureaucracy found in world religious history. He believed religious history formed through the dialectical movement between religious feeling and religious forms. While religious forms corresponded to specific historical periods, they would solidify into static dogmatism as history progressed, hindering the realization of religious feeling, and thus calling for new forms. Religious clergy, meant as mediators between humans and the divine, were inverted into authorities suppressing people's religious beliefs, concentrating all power in themselves. This directly attacked the clergy's despotic rule. Marx recorded Constant's vision of a future free religion, where people possessing free will could freely create religious forms, perfecting human existence. Marx noted this reflected Constant's own failure to achieve thorough materialism. From excerpts of the French historian Charles de Brosses's On the Fetish Gods, Marx adopted the concept of fetishism, also using it in his July critique of the Cologne Gazette. This concept became a crucial component of Marx's later thought. In his famous economic and philosophic manuscripts of 1844, written 2 years later, the exploration of this issue evolved into the problem of labor alienation, where objects dominate people. In Capital, Marx developed a complete system analyzing commodity fetishism, money fetishism, and capital fetishism. The naive materialist ideas of these 2 French thinkers greatly influenced Marx. 3 years later, in The Holy Family, Marx specifically discussed French materialism.
We see that Epicurus, Feuerbach, and French materialism were the 3 external sources of Marx's materialist thought. Later, many overly emphasized Feuerbach's influence on Marx, often to downplay Marx's originality, neglecting that Marx's materialist thought had its own developmental path. Both Feuerbach and Marx, leaders of the young Hegelians, moved towards materialism, an inevitable progression beyond Hegel's objective idealism. However, the exploration of a materialist conception of history, represented by the Bonn Notebooks, was precisely what Feuerbach lacked, precisely Marx's most valuable contribution, and precisely the truly progressive kernel within Hegel's view of history. This was the task Marx planned for his critique of Hegel's philosophy of Righten, early 1842. The more difficult part that Feuerbach himself, Moses Hess, and others, due to their inability to discard elitism and subjectivism, found impossible to overcome throughout their lives. Simply put, intellectuals viewing ordinary people as passive recipients of elite-imparted knowledge, while simultaneously seeing them as active individuals capable of being enlightened by elites, treating elites, knowledge, and propaganda as the prime movers of social progress, and equating revolution with propaganda. This is the historical idealism stemming from elitism. Feuerbach's inherent idealism meant he could only develop a religion of love, not significantly distancing himself from Schelling or Hegel. 3 years later, in the thesis on Feuerbach, Marx wrote, "The materialist doctrine concerning the changing of circumstances and upbringing forgets that circumstances are changed by people and that it is essential to educate the educator himself. This doctrine must, therefore, divide society into two parts, one of which is superior to society." 1 year later, in the contribution to the critique of Hegel's philosophy of right, introduction, he had arrived at the crucial conclusion of proletarian revolution. Nearly 30 years later, the elderly Feuerbach enthusiastically read Marx' Kapital and even joined the Social Democratic Party. Returning to the first half of 1842, Marx's thinking was still dominated by young Hegelian philosophy, specifically the objective idealism that exalted reason, viewing universal human reason as the driving force of historical change and the principle that the state, law, and even religion should follow. However, when Marx confronted concrete political issues, months later, cases like the debate on the law on thefts of wood and divorce law draft, which revealed the state and upper classes systematically oppressing the lower classes, he uncovered the truth of politics and law. The state was a tool for the upper classes to pursue private interests. The state suffers the greatest humiliation. Methods utterly repugnant to reason and law are used against the accused. Private interest tries to degrade, and is degrading, the state to the level of a means. This shattered Marx's original rationalist view of the state and philosophy of law, prompting his complete break with Hegel and turn towards historical materialism. In his October article, Proceedings of the 6th Rhine Province Assembly, 3rd article, Debates on the Law on Thefts of Wood, Marx sarcastically cited a case from the Bonn Notebooks. If Cuban savages attended the assemblies of the Rhine province estates, wouldn't they consider wood the idol worshipped by the Rhinelanders?